Hello, good evening. Welcome to our Tuesday evening budget workshop. We're joined here by Superintendent Jake Langlis, who will present the school budget to us. If you can just please pull the mic closer to you and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. The approach we took tonight was to walk you through how we got to today. So a little bit of history, but you're also very familiar with this budget and the work we've done. I did provide you a copy if you want to follow along. But it's a bit of a narrative. So we had our first piece of the process where things were approved and failed at the ballot box. So we re-up our efforts. And so I'll just work through some history, and any questions that you have along the way, please don't hesitate to ask. So after months of budget work, the school committee unanimously approved their version of the FY25 budget in April. And City Council, as you know, unanimously approved the budget after that school committee vote. On the 14th, the budget was rejected by voters, and I think that means that we have work to do. And so we've done some listening and invited folks to share talking points or thoughts they had on the budget. And we've since met with the school committee to do some more work. So just some facts to share. As you know, taxes are how schools are funded. We could debate for hours how I think that's not a great model for funding education, especially locally, but I'll spare you some of those details right now. Our state funding is just under $73 million. That's subsidy from the state through taxes. And the request to support schools at this point in time is $32.9 million. The remaining numbers that get us to the grand total are made up of fund balance and some other small revenues, as you can see on the revenue sheet. I want to talk about some things that we're hearing as we talk to members of the community and those who vote and some who did not. But as you know, the cost drivers, we have a total increase of $9,121,808, and those drivers are over $6 million in salaries and benefits increases. These are essentially contractual changes that happen. About 70% of our budget is human resources. So when they get their increases and their steps with their experience, that has an overall adjustment that obviously goes up. We also have proposed investing in a capacity building commitment of $3 million, a little more than that actually, in special education, in the goal to deflect future costs for students that are in out-of-district placements. We've talked about that a fair amount, but I'm happy to go into any detail there. We also have some unfunded mandates that I'm not here to debate whether or not they're good for our city or state, but they do have associated costs, and they include paid medical leave. There's a staff minimum wage that will actually take effect in FY26, but we're eyes up on that. So some of the things we're hearing, some are upset with the coverage that reported the local increase, that pointed a finger at the school budget almost solely on the night before the last election. We did try to get that information clarified, and certainly it was an ask of our community, but some of the information was a bit of a challenge. Some have also shared they don't understand the commitment to growing special education services at our schools, and that we should just leave things the way they are. And the real challenge with that is the exponential cost increases to that process. And I can share more detail if you'd like. There were hundreds of folks that supported the budget, and while the turnout was only 3.9%, there were also many voters that did not. It's unclear if the June 11th vote, if we work to that date, it's unclear if it will drive a better turnout due to primary votes occurring at the same time or not, but it may. A larger voter turnout may paint more of a clear picture of what our community wants for our kids. And from one perspective, this was actually shared at a school committee meeting, I thought it was well said that if there were 100 people in a room and 4 people answered a question, it would be difficult to conclude that the 4 people were the will of the group. However, those who turned out to vote, your voice is known, and we could only speculate what others may or may not want. We proposed reductions because 743 people voted no, and in addition to some who must have voted yes, 754 people voted that the budget was too high. And this is something I did hear from a number of people in our community. Our budget consists of 70% staff, as I mentioned, and these contractual increases along with benefits, again, is that $6 million increase. I touched base on the paid family medical leave. That cost to us next year from January 1 on the last 6 months of the fiscal years, estimated to be $282,000. We'll talk more about the minimum salary for teachers, ed techs, and school support staff that's been established, but we have some time before that is enacted. So the ranges of input range from we have to preserve the budget, or I even had some say we should add to it. We don't fund our schools enough. We also had many others say the tax burden is too high, it's too much. Some say our schools are improving, and some say the graduation rate is not high enough. Some have also said our schools are not improving fast enough, even though we have some good news, including a recent message from the Department of Education talking about 3 schools exiting what's known as Tier 1 status for a number of students who have certain barriers also not making the growth they need. That news actually came in last week. We continue to work on pathways like Next Step and Lewiston Academy, and that programming is aimed at helping students who currently struggle in that bell-to-bell schedule to work toward graduation. I still think as a superintendent and as an educator that if our kids don't reach that graduation point, that we have failed them and we need to do better. Recently, over 40 graduates were part of that list of students who participated in one or both of those programs, and we anticipate that number to grow. The delayed COVID impact for students who were in and around that high school time is now from a high school perspective. And so not just this year, but next, we will see some challenges with students who are already trying to earn credits in alternative ways or in other programs, but that impact is real, and we're following that data and trying to support students. Our 5-year graduation data is more comparable to the state 4-year data, and I just want to express to people who have brought up the graduation data publicly, that is large in part for us due to the barriers around language. Because language acquisition is complex, you can't jump into sophomore or junior year of a history class or advanced math when you're still trying to acquire English. And so the supports that are around that can sometimes limit students' access to credit-bearing courses, which instantly puts them in a good support structure, but takes them 5 years to achieve the credits that they wish to achieve. And just some things we need to talk about. I think sometimes we forget all the great things that are happening in school. So we can pause to talk about budget and that we need to go back to another referendum. And I think that's the work we do in a good democracy. But we also have a lot of celebrations happen this time of year because it's May and June is fast approaching. So just as a side note, when we do things like top 10 luncheon with just amazing students and their families that just happened here recently, many of our students go to top tier collegiate schools with both academic and athletic scholarships, and they are successful there. There's a lot of schools that send kids, but our students do well when they go to that next level. We're celebrating multiple state championships and other successes this year, so I always got to plug in Go Blue. Multiple students have won state-level trades, medical, and business competitions that are headed to nationals again. 15 students have earned their seal of biliteracy, something we worked hard with the state on for many years. This is a formal recognition from the state, and it goes on their high school transcript. These students have demonstrated a proficiency, much like the next bullet of the 100 students, actually just over 100 students, I think 105, tested as proficient in English through the Access test, which demonstrates their proficiency, and it's measured in academic skill, not just being able to have a conversation, but academic reading and writing. Our mock trial team won the state level again and competed at nationals. And various pathways are keeping students connected to school. And these pathways may be untraditional or some things that other districts don't do, but we have kids that have a level of need that other districts don't have. And so those are the things we continue to do to keep kids engaged with school, getting resources as a student, to making sure accessing school is something that we're not in the way of. I believe that kids feel loved every day and grow their emotional skills. And there's so many achievements, like I started with, that we couldn't mention them all. We could list them for hours. But I also think most important, every Lewiston graduate carries big blue devil pride everywhere they go. kids walk across that stage, we know what it's like when they talk about being a graduate from our community. They're very proud, and they should be. So I've been asked the question, if I approve this, what am I approving? So if I vote yes, so we listed out some things here. If you vote yes, you're voting to approve that we continue to do the work of improving our schools by maintaining the resources at this year's current level, that adding 2 staff that specifically work to help students who struggle to read and get closer to their classmates at grade level, and that's 1 at Geiger and 1 at Farwell. We maintain the Dean model at LMS, which has proven to be successful. We have data to back that. Students have done much better from a behavioral perspective over the last 2 years with that Dean in place. So that's not a new add, it's a shift in funding. The funding for that has come to pass. That we support facilitating student resources to keep children accessing schools no matter what the challenges are thrown at them by whatever their life circumstances are. We recognize the financial impacts of our out-of-district high-need programming and how that must shift because it's unsustainable. Our hope is to invest and create spaces we can program in so we do not continue to spend on other people's annual increases.
If you could speak just a little louder, that would be great.
Okay. We work to continue to improve teacher retention, teacher efficacy, and enhance instructional knowledge. There is an additional school resource officer that would be intended for the elementary level in this budget. And we embrace the fact that good schools grow and improve the community as a cornerstone of economic development. The initial proposal for the referendum vote was not a small ask. We're aware of that. We do hope citizens, parents, and those who vote in Lewiston realize the multi-year approach to deflect future expenses through our systematic investment in what we do locally for high-need students. Obviously, we have a lot more work to do, but as a resident and as a parent, I also pay taxes, and when it comes to schools, I'm proud to pay my tax bill. It's one of the few places where we can see the democratic process in action, and it includes that public referendum at the end, which I think is a good checks and balance for us. So obviously, there's many factors to consider in a budget of this size. So the school committee spent hours working on some adjusted proposals a week ago, and came up with the following chart to reduce technology funding by $100,000, to reduce 1 coach. This is a multilingual coach that's currently unfilled, so it doesn't impact a current employee. Slow down the special education rollout by reducing that by $150,000, and that's just a straight reduction from proposed staff to do that work. Central office, we proposed $25,000 reduction, and that is looking like a front desk person, some equipment, and some supplies to curb some of that cost. The other component you should see here is the fund balance increase. So it's using a little more of that fund balance. We're still trying to back off of how much fund balance we use year to year as a good financial plan. Adding this 140 back doesn't hurt us in the long run, but it's something that we want to make sure we're not pushing too far, because if that fund balance dries up, we will have no way to fund that portion of our budget. School committee supported this reduction after a couple hours of work with a 9-0 vote, and they contemplated making no changes to the budget, but I do think that we heard voters, and what we heard was those who came out to vote were looking for a reduction, and so that's some of the work that we did, and we are bringing it forward to you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Questions? And yes, Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I guess first I would like to see if the council would be amenable to, if anyone in the audience wants to speak, that we have public comment, even though this is just a workshop. Given that it's an item that we're going to be taking action on Thursday, and we want to get as much feedback as we can, I would propose that we do that after the council has its first round of questions. I guess next, so we're looking at, and this is a question for Superintendent Langless. On the bottom of the first page, it says an increase of $9.1 million. Is that the total increase that we're looking at, or is that the increase in the local share?
So that's a local share increase.
Okay. So then when I take that 9.1 million and look at some of the costs that are going into that, we've got over 6 million in salaries and benefits for current employees. And then we're trying to build up our capacity for special education with a $3 million investment there. I mean, that's 9 million right there. And looking at the second page here, the second bullet on the second page, so the outplaced special ed program was over budget by 3 million this year, according to this memo.
Yes.
And that's only going to continue year after year. So it seems like spending 3 million for the next year in order to start to stave off those increases only makes financial sense. So looking at those things, I don't really see anything else that could be cut, honestly. I mean, unless you want to get into cutting staff positions, and then that just puts our students at even more of a disadvantage. And that's all I have for comments for right now.
Councilor Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Superintendent Langlis, a couple of things that, one of the things that we touched upon was special education. You said you could elaborate a little bit on that and what goes into that. Could you share why this is important that we start rolling that back a little bit, just so everybody knows?
I can. If I can put a chart back up. Let's see if my computer will cooperate. Here it comes. So this may be small to see. Let me make it bigger. So this may be hard to see from your angle, but I'll walk through it. What we did was we took the cost by year from 2021 right up till today. We had to do a projection on this year because we know our month-to-month cost currently, but we don't have the end-of-year billing yet, so we worked from there. And then where you can see the line, I went from 2025 down to 2031, which seems like a long time, but it's 6 years. And I used a formula to grow the tuition cost by 6%, which we've been told is the cap annually. I did the main care seed at 3%, transportation at 3%, and you can see the totals. The challenge we're faced with now, when you look at 2024, we're projected to spend, according to my calculation, just under $12 million on special purpose private schools. That's tuition. And remember, the main care seed is that reimbursement model. So even though our kids go elsewhere, they can, those organizations can submit for reimbursement under different chapters and sections of our budget and reimbursement models. And the portion of the federal is paid by the federal, and the portion of the state falls back on the local school district. So that's that main care seed. So if you look at this year's right now for main care seed, we're projected at spending almost $2.2 million in reimbursement to those we already pay tuition to provide the services to our high-need kids. The transportation number is projected to be at around 2.7. I will admit that number is probably a little high. When I did the percentages for the last couple of months, it was like 2.67. And so you can see how those totals run up rather quickly. And if you go just one more year, it sits at 12.1, and then 12.7, and then 13.3, and 14. And when you get to that 6-year window out from now, you could be looking at a bill that's over $16 million for the same number of kids on what I think is a conservative trajectory. So I put it in a chart just to show just this exponential growth, and I just don't see how it is sustainable. Not to mention, we also have a number of kids on a waiting list, and so they receive tutoring. It's not as much as we'd like to do for them, but for some students, it's become very difficult to manage them in the school space, and without enough staff and space dedicated for those services, those students are waiting. And if those students were also placed, we estimate it'd be between $100,000 and $130,000 per student to place them elsewhere, and we have somewhere near 50 of them. And so that money adds up quick. On the right-hand side of this sheet, I put together just a number of students with, if we brought back 10 students, at $129,000 apiece, you can see the tiered out formula for the funds we could save. Now, this wouldn't be a full savings because we still have to pay for the programs and the lights to be on and the heat and all that, but for 100 kids to go to school elsewhere, it's projected out at about $13 million. If we provide for them in-house, we can do it for far, far, far less money. And so I appreciate the question. It is data I wanted to share, but please know that some of this is projection from end of this year and then forward through other years with percentage increases we've seen trend over time.
Thank you for sharing that. One other question I have is, I'm sure you've probably already looked at this. Are there any other unfilled positions that you might be able to, I mean, whether it's an admin at Dingley or anything like that? Is there anything that we could probably look at, maybe?
So this budget already did reduce a district level position for $134,000. We don't see where else we could take admin out of. If anything, some of our admin think that they could use more support, like LMS with wanting the second dean to stay. But we've gone through all of those lines, and I think Councilor Harriman might be able to contribute to that. We looked at these pieces in the school committee budget process. I'm pretty detailed when I go through the lines. I just don't see how else we could pull more funds out of this without having negative impacts on the kids as it relates to higher class sizes, too high of class sizes, and some other things that we currently provide, like a school resource officer, like we have 2 staff that work in the Student Resource Center. That's our close partnership with the store next door. I know that was talked about pretty heavily the last few days. But again, those are positions that support our students and build relationships and provide those resources. So could they be reduced? The answer is yes. Do we as a community want to reduce by those? I think that's the real question we have, and I think voters will have to tell us that.
Thank you.
Yes, I will give all the councilors a chance to speak once, and then we will head to public comment. Councilor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Superintendent, for being here. We will come back for other comments. Will that be correct after they speak?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So I guess whoever's going to speak tonight, please state your name and where you live, so we know who you are. Sometimes that gets mumbled or jostled around, and I'll hold my comments till we come back to the floor. Thank you.
Councilor Sol, did you have something?
I can go now. I was going to wait until public comment, but it's really more, thank you for, I know that you guys have been working really hard on this, and nobody likes to be the person that says it needs to be more, but I don't know where you can find other reductions. I just don't believe that this is going to pass with the vote. I think anything under the option A, the $1 million, I think that's what the city is going to be looking for. And again, it feels really terrible to have to say those words, but the voters have voted, and I think they're going to be looking for a little bit more. So that's, and I may have more to say after public comment, but.
Councilor Najin.
Thank you, Superintendent Langlis, for being here tonight. I have a series of questions. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. One of the things I'd like you to do, if you could possibly do, is just explain the dean model so that we have an understanding of exactly what supports that gives.
Yeah, so real quickly, a dean is on a teacher contract, but essentially they help, they're kind of peacemakers. They learn the kids, understand the kids, look for their baselines to try to see when they're off. They help deflect situations before they turn into violent situations. They work with students following those situations. They monitor their academic progress. They monitor their check-in, check-out, their goals day to day. How are you doing? So it's really an extension of that pulse on the school that I think we really need to have to help kids work through their skill building before it turns into something that we don't want in our schools. And statistically, it's showing some good results.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that I discovered today when we were going over our budget and also looking at your school budget is that SRO position. The city council had approved one additional officer and then basically unfreezing two positions. In the police budget, there actually wasn't a corresponding 25% for that SRO. So in effect, we're unfreezing 2 police officers and then getting a quarter of a police officer in order to fund that SRO. And so I just wanted to let you know that, because I'm not sure if you were aware of it, and also let the council know that as well.
Yeah, so in the past, what we've done is, once we have a budget of the 75K toward the item, I'll reach out to chief. We usually pursue grants, things like that, to try to help float it. But it feels unfair to ask him to put in the budget when we carry the bulk of it, and if it doesn't make it here, then it's in one place and not the other. So that's typically what we've been doing when we propose these.
And there is a possibility of receiving additional funding from an outside source in order to cover that 25% gap?
We continue to look, and if approved, we can. It's beneficial when we do the grant writing to say, we have this position, the school has been willing to fund this much, would you match it to make it a complete?
Thank you. So you're taking 140,000 from fund balance. What does that leave? Like, what is your percentage of fund balance versus your budget yearly at this point?
My fact checkers are sitting behind me and they can provide that direct answer. He's going to get it.
Thank you. I think it's rather low, though. Am I correct?
We're okay, I think, with fund balance. The question is when we use the almost 5 million to start our budget each year. So you go 2 years and you use 10. And that's my concern, is even if there's 8 or something to that effect out there, you start to get to a place where you can't go. But we do have statutes in state regulations for how much we can have. That number was inflated by the state because of COVID funds and the labor shortage, and that number is coming back down now. So we're within the threshold.
You're within the threshold. Are you at the high end or low end? Just so I have a better idea.
We're at the higher end.
We're at the higher end.
It's a 9%.
So if you're at the higher
Actually,
end,
Bill, can I just have, Mr. Grant, if you can just come down into this chair, it's just going to be worlds easier for everyone.
Adam's getting the fund balance.
well, if you are at the higher end, does that give you the opportunity to possibly use a little bit more of fund balance? Or
So the answer to that is yes, we could. The problem is it's not sustainable, and that's really what I worry about. And so every year we use, the money that we're using is just gone from that funding perspective. The year that we don't have any left, so let's say that's 3, 4, however it tiers out, depending on the budget cycles, that's just a gap you instantly have to make up in 1 year or reduce by that much. And it's such a large number, I'm hesitant to grow it. I was hesitant to use more recently, but it felt like it might help with the situation a little bit.
to Councilor Sewell's point, I'm also a little hesitant on if we pass this budget the way it sits before us, whether or not it will actually pass at a referendum again. And so I would suggest possibly, looking to see if you could possibly shift more fund balance if there's no other positions that you can cut. And then in that, when we talk about sustainability, it's clearly not sustainable that we're required to outsource private school education for full cost while competing for the same employee base, in many times well outside of our own county. And so within those spaces, I'm just wondering, you'd mentioned tutoring. I don't know if that's a lesser cost option. I don't know if working with Murphy Homes or Sandcastle or any of the other organizations that are within this city can save money. But I also have questions about whether or not, because I know Sandcastle had a very hard time staffing. And so when we look at building out these programs, I'm afraid that we'll have a hard time competing for these educators as well. And back in COVID, we had cut, I believe it was 61 positions that just were never filled again, right?
Almost all, yes.
Yeah. And so, that's one of my concerns, is that even if we work to build out the in-house tutoring services without some type of change, or in-house educational services, without some type of change in that state mandate, we're going to run into a situation where we just won't be able to compete against the private market, and we'll be required to pay top dollar. There's a very limited amount of folks that are qualified for some of these positions. And so one of the things I had suggested before was possibly working together as a council and the school committee and the superintendent to send a clear message that these are not sustainable positions to the legislature, and I'd like to see if we could follow up on that, after the budget. So those are just some points that I have. I can wait for public comment for sure.
Just one add-on to that. I have the same concerns, but I also want to add that we can only tutor kids if they're already on a wait list, and if a spot opens up, they go. And so that trajectory of those millions of dollars is only going to grow because we are legally obligated. So if a Margaret Murphy opens up a new space or has a seat available, the student on the waiting list can go there. And that is that $130,000 type thing, even here locally in our community.
And just to follow up on that, just to verify, we're also competing against every other school district for the same slots. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Any other Councilor Chittum? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Superintendent Langley, I'm curious about the 5% reduction in the effort to bring these special education students back to Lewiston. What sort of effect does that reduction of $150,000 have on your initial $3 million first-year expenditure to recoup this money, and referring back to your chart, to ultimately save dollars for the city of Lewiston? Does that push this out further? Does it reduce the size of the program? Can you talk a little bit about what sort of adverse impact this reduction would have on that goal?
Sure. I think we're operating close to that critical threshold where to fund a program like this that has the right supports built in, you need a clinician, you need teachers, you need behavioral specialists or BHPs, behavioral professionals. You need support staff in and around that. We have to modify some spaces to make sure we can appropriately house it to meet ADA and things of those nature. So I think it's still feasible, within reach. If we go much further, you start getting to that threshold of how many staff do you have versus how many kids can you bring back in before you don't have enough to actually do it. We've seen some programs run what I think is too lean, and it's hard on the staff, it's hard on the families, it's hard on the kids. And so if we can properly staff it, it gives us a much better chance to say this works with this ratio and this model, and we can bring it back to you and say, and we saved money. This is what we'd like to do for a next step. But we have to do that work first. So to answer your question, it will have an impact. I do think we can still build something and get it moving forward. But if we go further, it will be a challenge.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll be heading to public comment. Sorry, yes.
We've got the fund balance question.
Oh, perfect.
I can get you the fund
Please
balance
introduce
numbers.
yourself,
Hi,
sir.
I'm Adam Hansen. I'm the controller for the school department. Good to see everybody. So some fund balance information for you. At the end of the FY23 fiscal year, our general fund unassigned fund balance was 11.1 million, and that was right around 11% of this year's budget. We have committed 5,000 of that, 4.5 million, not thousand, million to be used for next year. So that would leave about 6.5 million unassigned going into next year, and that would be a little under 6% of next year's proposed budget. So we'd be taking a big, if the numbers stay as they are, and if we don't generate a bunch of more fund balance coming out of this year, which I don't suspect we will, then our percentage has dropped from about 11 to about 6.5.
I'm sorry, say 6.5?
6.5 is using the 4.5 million toward next year's budget would drop the unassigned to about 6.5 million.
And does that include the 140,000 reduction that is proposed in this evening?
Yes.
Thank you.
Counselor Najin, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Schillian. So on that, your fund balance is basically filled by unspent funds from the previous years, is that correct? There's no other mechanism in which you get monies?
Unspent funds and unanticipated revenues, the combination of those over the years add up to your fund balance.
Just out of curiosity, what are your, past unanticipated revenues, I guess?
Just as an example, if we budget 50 million for state subsidy and we receive 51 million, that would be $1 million of unanticipated revenue that goes into fund balance.
Thank
So
you.
those types of things can happen at any time they add to your fund balance.
Not a common thing.
It's just an example, Jay.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around how you fill your fund balance. So basically, you either ask for it in your regular budget to set aside, or it's money that's not spent, or the tax ferry delivers something to you.
The fund balance was really built up when COVID happened because we were able to use lots of federal dollars to support supplies. We had lots of staff who were unavailable to work because of various causes. And that's really where that fund balance ballooned for the first time in a long time. So the tax fare is not out there coming back, I guess is the...
That's an interesting point. I guess the question there is historically before COVID, so like 2018, 2019, where were you running on for percentage for fund balance?
I'd have to come back to you with those. I can get you that information.
Thank you.
Did you have something, Mr. Grant?
No,
Or it looked like you were going to say something.
It definitely wasn't in the $10 million range, so there would be some years we would be ending the year, spot on as far as $0 going into a fund balance to $1.7 million kind of creeping up. But the amounts that we saw, you couldn't have more than 3% of your budget in fund balance pre-COVID. Then when COVID happened and there was these dollars, that's when fund balances started to grow. And so they increased it to the 9%, and then now they're starting to sunset it back to 5%.
And the other factor with fund balance is when you cut 61 positions like we did last year, when we are going lean again in this proposed budget, it's not generating fund balance with unfilled positions that were never budgeted. So it's got this kind of rebound effect. So for example, if we have very little fund balance this year, and Adam mentioned that we had about 6.5, if we use 5 now and 5 next year, that money's gone.
At this point, if I can just poll our studio audience here, just by show of hands, how many people plan on making public comment? Okay, all right. So yeah, here's what we're going to do. If we can, we are now having public comment. Please state your name and location, or name and where you live, and we'll be observing a strict 3-minute time limit. If your comments run over, feel free to email us at publiccomment@lewistonmaine.gov, and if we can start queuing up behind the podium so we can proceed in an efficient fashion, that would just be wonderful. We can start.
My name is Kennedy Raymond. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Connors Elementary School in Lewiston. I want to first start by thanking both school committee and city council for their continued support in funding our schools. Like I said, I'm a 4th grade teacher at Connors, and I've spent the last 6 years teaching in Lewiston. When we consider what a city needs, the first thing that should come to mind is effective public schools. In Lewiston, we have some of the most incredible people working in our schools. They show up each and every day for students in ways you could never imagine until you've lived it. I live it every day. Our schools, staff, and students have so much potential. Despite that, I'm standing here today because so many in our city are quick to say that public schools are failing our children and in the same breath don't want to fully fund our schools. I'm not here to argue about the work I do with students each day. I know the work I do is meaningful, impactful, and important, but how can we continue to do what is best for kids when you're asking us to continue to make cuts? Wherever those cuts have to happen, I can assure you we can't afford to make them. Class sizes cannot get larger. We cannot afford to lose the positions we currently have. We are seeing the academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs of students continue to increase, and in order to meet those needs in a sustainable and effective way, we need to fully fund our schools. Each day, the next generation of Lewiston walks through our hallways, and if our city does not put their support in fully funding our schools, I'm worried about what that future will look like.
Ron Potvin, 291 Pond Road, Ward 6. 3 points I'd like to make. Former school committee member, former finance chair for the school committee, worked on these numbers for many years, and the first point I'd like to make is the importance of being able to bring these kids back from this outplacement. It's an amazing thing of the amount of money that we have already spent over the years to do this. Now, granted, nobody can see the future, but we, as Lewiston grew and the needs grew, what should have been a program inside the city, we had to go elsewhere. Now's the time to bring it back, as Jake pointed out in that schematic. The cost is just going to be exponential, and that has to happen, and I'm hoping the public can understand that. Second, I'd like to just say that whenever I've looked at stuff, it's like, where do you want to go? Where is the norm? And I've always taken time to do some research, and 3 of my favorite sites are the Census Bureau, the National Association of Realtors, and Sperling's Ranked and Rated, which is a demographic engine, all sorts of information. One of those is property taxes. And I just spent last hour going through it all for this year, and guess what? Lewiston is right smack dab in the middle compared to the rest of the country. And I challenge all of you to go on those sites and take a look for yourselves. That even with this increase, Lewiston is the national average. And the problem is that the cost of municipal government is just expensive across the board, across the country. So, and, lastly, I just, want to say that everything that's being done by the school department is mostly mandated, and it needs to be supported. And the one part that I probably disagree with my former colleagues on is the fund balance. What I'm hearing from taxpayers is that's where their ire is. That's where they're having problems with. That we've already taxed them, and we already have 3 mills sitting there in the bank, not using it after taxing people for it, and they're going back to them asking for more. And I think that from their perspective, I think they'd rather pay if there's a shortfall rather than keep it in the bank and keep asking for more. So I think there's some room to add at least $500,000 from that fund balance going forward. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jay Rich, and I'm the president of the Lewiston Education Association, which represents over 800 educators, ed techs, nurses, clinicians, and technology staff. I'm also a multilingual teacher at McMahon Elementary, and I want to thank the school committee as well as the city council for their unanimous support in funding our schools. Like Jake said earlier, I want to point out that our students and our educators have overcome the seemingly impossible this year. In addition to having a mass shooting in our city, we have also a lot of things to brag about, including our mock trial team going to nationals again, sending dozens of students to Skills USA. We're graduating some of the top kids in the state. And despite barriers some students face, we are also graduating kids that are unhoused, students with disabilities, and students who are multilingual. This is huge. We also had over 100 students exit our multilingual program, our biggest number yet, and we want to continue that growth. This budget aims not only to continue the progress, but also help us climb out of the COVID years stronger than before and invest in the future. 2 line items I really wanted to stress were the special education and the store next door funding. I think Mr. Langless did a good job explaining the special ed line and why that is important, and how it can also provide a free public education to our students in their neighborhood schools. The store next door provides everyday necessities that most kids don't have to think about, including food, clothing, but also necessities such as toothpaste, tampons, deodorant, and more. Taking these resources away in an additional budget cut would drastically impact the educational experience for hundreds of kids in Lewiston. We would be telling our most vulnerable students they don't matter. Lastly, as a negotiator in multiple contracts in this district, I am happy to say that Lewiston is working really hard to make salaries and working conditions that are competitive and livable. Lewiston is working toward being one of the most competitive districts in this state in order to retain and recruit the best educators. Just this year, Lewiston educators were named County Teachers of the Year and School Librarians of the Year. If we want our schools to continue to make progress and to continue to retain the best teachers, we have to say yes with no further budget cuts. We say yes to our students, we're saying yes to our educators, we're saying yes to our future, and Lewiston is worth it. Thank you.
Matthew Ergren, Ward 4. So tonight we have the new and revised school budget shared with us. I was at the school committee meeting post first vote down. Here are some thoughts. Let's look at the voter turnout for the past few school budgets. 590 in 223, 369 in 222, 572 in 221. Yet when a larger number turned out this year, the result was brushed off as not a mandate to change things because the results went against the budget. If the vote had been in favor of the budget, it would have been portrayed as an accurate will of the people. Elections have consequences, and yes, when even 4% came out to vote on the budget, they came out to vote and spoke clearly the budget was too high. We were also told that night by more than one member of the school committee that they should just resubmit the budget because we, the citizens of Lewiston, were too dumb and unable to understand it. The clear majority of the people who voted that day said it was too high. We were not clueless sheep who voted. We looked over the budget documents, and then we voted how we believed, yes or no. Would I like to see a bigger turnout? Yes. Hell, I think a minimum of 25% of the people who voted in the last general election to approve or disapprove the budget. This school budget also proposes to keep Easter positions, which were funded by COVID funds that we all knew would have to come to an end. If you knew your personal budget was going to have less money coming in, there comes a time when you have to cut things from your budget, especially things that were funded by the extra money you knew was going to run out. This is money the school committee knew was not going to be hard, was going to be hard to keep in the budget at the same level and not force an increase on the people, but they kept it in anyways. After the events of October 25th, we were promised help, all the help we needed to help the city heal and come back together. Has school leadership reached out to these groups along with the state and federal governments to see what help they can provide us to cut our expenses? I was glad we kept the SRO position in. Once more, October 25th changed how many of us look at security here in Lewiston. Some of the money being spent on special education is to work on bringing students back in the district instead of being on buses for maybe 6 hours a day to get to programs we do not have in-house. In the long term, this investment will hopefully lower our cost of our special ed going forward. I was sad to see come away. I am grateful to see tonight from Jake that we do have proposals of what the numbers of savings in theory will look like 3 and 5 years out. In the end, the school committee made a choice to cut $500,000 from the budget. Was it possible to cut more? Maybe. I understand 70% of this budget is a fixed cost we cannot change. Since the school system has more unfunded state and federal mandates than we can reasonably pay for, we need help from our state and federal legislators to fix some of this.
That's
So
time,
these
thank you.
Good evening, Bob McCarthy, Ward 2. Problem I have is, it seems like the school system in Lewiston over the years has adopted every new fad, every new idea, every new everything, and the results don't seem to be proving out that any of it works. I have no problem with the teachers. I think we have a great group of teachers. I think the problem is a system that they have to work under, and I think that needs to change. Back in the old days, class size was 26 to 28 students. If it got to 30, they started a new class. That's the way it was. I know society's changed. You can't do that now. So the first thing they did was they reduced class sizes. I'm not sure what Lewiston is now, 15, 14, somewhere around there, students per teacher. That was the first thing. And then later on it was ed techs. Oh, we got to add ed techs. That's going to solve our problems. So they add ed techs. And then there was DEI thrown in there and SEL. And now I understand something that I just learned this year is teacher coaches. And that just blows my mind. We're having trouble getting teachers, and we've got teacher coaches. We've got great teachers that should be teaching in the classroom. If someone's got a college education and they've been teaching for a few years, they should know how to teach. The number that really strikes me is you take the 9.1 million, and that brings the ask from the city to 32 point something million. That's a 38% increase this year in what the school system is asking from the taxpayers of the city of Lewiston. The 9.1 million is a 38% increase in the amount of taxes that the school system is asking from the taxpayers of Lewiston. Now you've got seniors out there that went along and had their taxes frozen last year, and now the legislature in their infinite wisdom eliminated that program. So not only are these seniors looking at a 10% increase this year, they've got a 5% increase carried over from last year, and then this budget, bloated budget, both city and school, is going to be the basis for when the reevaluation happens. And then there's going to be a lot of people put out of their homes because they just can't afford to live in Lewiston. And I think that's sad. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samantha Hatch. I live in Lewiston. I am a special ed teacher at Farwell Elementary. I wanted to start with repeating kind of what Kennedy said, is that our schools are doing the best we can for our children, but we can't continue to remove more positions. To fully support our students and help them get to where they can in their life, we need to maintain where we are and potentially grow. I am in one of those special ed programs where the kids who come back from outplacement come into. And if you guys wish to continue to pull as many kids back into the school, our special ed programs need to have the funding to support and continue staff to stay in our programs. Our program, it is very difficult. It is amazing job, and I absolutely love it, but it is hard. And if we don't have enough money to maintain our staff to support these children, we will have to keep outplacing them. So we can't keep cutting from it, because otherwise our staff will get burnt out and will leave for a job that is easier and pays the same, if not more. And if you want to save money in the long run by not outplacing students, we need to maintain and support the staff that is here. And we need to, yes, money is important, and obviously we need to make sure everyone can succeed, whether they're the property owners in Lewiston and paying that tax, or it is our students to help them succeed. We need to remember the budget is money, but it also directly impacts so many people directly. So it's not just numbers, it's also humans. So, thanks.
My name is Amy Ranger, and I'm in Ward 7, and I teach at Lewiston High School. And I also feel I want to address, actually, Bob McCarthy, what he said about the classroom sizes. All of my classes have 20 students, and thinking about numbers in the classroom, the way things are now, having many classes with multiple languages, having a smaller number, it makes more sense to actually be able to teach the amount of students in the class properly to reach those students. But yeah, the classroom sizes are about 20, 26 from my experience in the class. And I just want to urge people to support the education of our Lewiston kids. It's the most important thing. Thank you so much.
Further public comments? And if there's more people who would like to speak, please start queuing up.
People don't understand Q. I'm back. Janet McCarthy, Ward 2, and I don't have much better to say tonight than I did at the council meeting the other night. I first want to say I'm extremely disappointed with our school committee not being able to make some more significant cuts than $500,000 out of a $9 million budget. I'm also disappointed. 111, but the $9 million increase. I'm also disappointed at some of the school committee people and Councilor Harriman for recommending that we just submit the same budget. Those voters didn't know what they were doing. Well, I was one of those voters, and I do know what I'm doing. I'll tell you right now, I would throw all kinds of money at the school if they were succeeding, but they're not. Lewiston High School, nationally, is ranked 13,700 and something out of 17,000 something schools. Tell me that Lewiston's doing a good job, and I'll say BS. Talk to me about special education. I'm going to cry about this, okay? I have firsthand family experience with 2 special needs children in the Lewiston school system that are being failed miserably because the people doing the job are incompetent, inadequate. They do things to trigger the kids. They don't pay attention to the kids. I have one that escapes the school. Now, how that happens, you know, I've been in the school system, I've been through the school system, my children have been through the school system, their children, they have never heard of kids running away from school and being allowed to happen. In this particular incident, this child was missing for 2 hours, and they never called the parents. Tell me what a good job they're doing. And I'll tell you again, BS. I'm not throwing, I don't want to bring those kids back to the Lewiston school system. Oh, it's going to cost less, but they're going to slip right through the cracks. They're not getting an education. Not only are they eloping and they're being triggered in class, but they're behind grade level for reading, and the teacher's answer to that is, well, that's as good as it gets. That's just the way it is. No, that isn't the way it is, and it shouldn't be. I'm extremely, extremely disappointed with the school committee, Mr. Langlois. I'm not disappointed with the teachers. They're doing the best they can with what they have, but I don't think it's working. So throwing more money at it is a mistake. Cut that budget in half. Find a way.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie Cowett, Ward 1. I did write a speech, but I'm just going to talk about what she was talking about. I've worked in the school department for 16 years. I run a program. Called The Store Next Door, and I just want to talk about how amazing our schools are and the stuff that we do for children and youth. I'll talk about one story. Christmas Day, a few years ago, we had a pregnant teen that called me on Christmas Day. She was delivering a child, and that child was delivered stillborn, and I got that call and had to go to the hospital and be with that student. I also had just became a mother that year, and obviously had never experienced that. But so I went to the hospital and spent the day with that student, and that student now is a mother of 3 children. She runs her own business, is a homeowner, and is doing amazing things. So our school does turn out great youth and adults, and I get to see them every day working in a homeless program that experience horrible, horrible things in this community, but meet amazing teachers and support staff in our school. And I think our teachers and our support staff are amazing and do amazing things every day, because I get to see it with kids that experience the most horrible things that you can only imagine here in Lewiston that probably none of you have ever imagined in your life. Thank you.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay. I'm much shorter than usual. My name is Faucia Musa. I run a small organization here in downtown Lewiston. I just want to say first, I am so proud of Lewiston schools. They have came a long way. Today I was looking at the Sun Journal, and so many kids made it onto honor roll, okay? My organization and I frequently volunteer at the food pantry on Thursdays at Martello. We also work alongside sometimes with Store Next Door. I can never imagine the amount of barriers the teachers have to overcome. Kids from different walks of life, from different war-torn country, so many emotional issues, and one teacher. I cannot imagine cutting budget from what is already being exacerbated. So I'm asking all the citizens, I'm from Auburn, but everybody from Lewiston, please, do not cut the budget because we need it. Our kids are thriving, despite of what all you think, our kids are thriving. We are doing better than many towns in Maine. Thank you.
Further public comment? And back to the council. Superintendent Langlis, what is, we passed the budget the last time, everyone up here, and I'm pretty sure we all voted for it in the referendum. What is the plan to get the word out to the voters of Lewiston?
I mean, we'll do our messaging, of course. We don't try to encourage people which way to vote, but we do try to remind people it's the day to vote. We message out on social media, calls to homes and whatnot. For contacts that we have, spread the word. I think people need to show up to vote, and it'll give us direction.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for everyone who spoke. I have a few fans out there who I'm probably going to upset with my comments today, and I'm just going to tell you the truth. Cost of living in the last 20 years has rose 71%. School budgets rose 51%. People who own homes at $150,000, and that's me, whose home's really worth $400,000, see an increase of 150% in my pockets. I feel for those in a fixed budget. I'm retired. I'm a disabled veteran. At the same time, their kids were educated by their grandparents and people who had to make sacrifices. I personally feel nothing should be cut from the budget. I think that I'd prefer to see the school take $1 million of their fund balance, slide it over, and keep all their programs so we move forward. Special education is extremely important, and anybody out there who says a kid can take a 2-hour drive to Biddeford every day and come back and never have no contact with their own age group doesn't understand education. That's what's happening out there. That's a sinful thing we are doing here in Lewiston. Terrible, terrible thing. All these mandates. How many of our legislators do you see out there in the audience? None. And they're on the education committee, at least 2 of them. Where are they at? They're not here. They don't care. You got a problem? Take it up in November. They're the ones making us pay millions of dollars more out of our tax dollars for all this stuff, and they're not funding it. That's a real problem. The problem's not this committee here, or the school committee, or our council. That's not what the problem is. Last 20 years, the councils, and I'm going to say councils all, squeaked and squeaked and squeaked and squeezed and squeezed. And now what do we have? We have a big problem that we had to inherit. Special education alone is crazy. We didn't make those rules. It's time to fix it, and we ain't going to fix it by cutting it. Quite frankly, it's not going to happen. Yes, it stinks. 3% for me, that's terrible. Especially with an audit coming up, I can only imagine my taxes a year from now. They're going to be high. Something I'm going to have to figure out. Hopefully I don't have to sell my home and buy something smaller. But the reality is, it's the reality. People paid for my kids to go to school. I have a special needs daughter who's 37 years old, who will live with me for as long as I'm here. Got great education, got great care in the system. Some fall through the cracks, and I'm sorry. I apologize for you in the school system, but many do not. Many come on to be very successful. So that's why it's extremely important that we keep this in mind. And I know some of my council members would like to see a larger cut. I want to keep all programs, and I see that he's got a fund balance of 6.5. He mentioned you can live with 5, slide $1 million over, and keep all your programs. Let's keep the important stuff. And if we run out of money, as was set out here in the audience earlier, then we'll fund it. We'll find the money if we have to. But people who don't understand school, he's got to pay bills July 1st. We don't get money till later. That's why they have a fund balance. We have a fund balance here in the city, too. It's not like it's a brand new thing. It's kind of like a savings plan, right? Not a lot of people have that these days, but it's very important to keep it. So I want you all to keep that in mind. For me, special ed kids are the most important things in our world today. They are our future. They're going to take care of us. That's what's important, is we take care of our parents and grandparents. I'm hoping that they're going to take care of me at some point in time in this process. And they're not going to get it if they're not educated, if they're not taken care of. Thank you. Oh, one more thing.
Please continue, Councilor Gallant.
The store next door, best thing since sliced bread. If you don't think so, you don't understand it, quite frankly.
Please hold your applause. Thank you. Thank you.
I
Quiet
run
in
a
the audience.
pantry, and I support them wholeheartedly, and we help them with clothing and all kinds of things. And the kids that they see are the bottom of the layer of all kids that are out there. They need us. Thank you.
Councilor Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for everybody who spoke. It was really heard. One of the things I want to say first off is I'm not in favor of cutting any funding to the store next door. That is not on the table for me. I am not in favor of cutting anything else out of this budget. I would echo what Councilman Gallant said. I think what we could do and what I'd like to see is maybe slide some money over from the fund balance, because again, historically, it's never been this high. I think sliding a little bit more money over there to ease some of the taxpayers' burden, I think that would be fair. I really don't want to see any more cuts, but I think, it would make sense to lower that fund balance a little bit more, and I'd like to see at least $1 million go that way. Thank you.
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Investing in our schools is investing in our future. I don't know how more clearly I can say that. We cannot cut schools and expect this city to grow and thrive. We have to fund our education. I'm upset that there is a $500,000 reduction. I will be voting when the primaries come out June 11th to restore the budget. On the 28th of May, when this council has word, I am going to be voting to restore the initial budget. That's the way I feel. We need to support our educational system, or we're going to wither. Thank you.
Further comments from the council? Councilor Najin.
One of the things I'd like to point out is I understand the pain that the municipal tax produces, especially for our seniors. But SSI COLAs have been adjusted 18.49% in the past 4 years. The state freeze on income tax, on property tax, was during a time when CMP bills, oil and gas, were 60% higher than they are right now. There's definitely an issue with the tax base. It's just not large enough. It's not large enough, and in my case, I don't pay enough. I can tell you that 100%. The valuation on my home is nothing near what the sale value for my property is, the market value for my property is. I look at people in my community who are paying $9,000 on a home in taxes that I'm paying $2,500 a year on. So, you know, it's an inequitable system until that piece goes in. One thing I would suggest going forward, and I've heard this from several parents, is on the half days, if we could figure out a way to keep the kids in school in some type of programming, and also possibly figure out a way to possibly abandon the shortened day school waiver, I think that would build a lot of goodwill with parents, because they have a difficult time figuring out what to do with their children. And as far as, you know, basically, kids get out of school half-day Wednesdays, and either their parents structure their work schedules in order to accommodate for that, or they don't. And either way, it's probably a bad outcome in some cases. And so, if there's some way to figure out a way to keep kids within that frame, that'd be great. Another thing I'd like to point out is that I think the school could do a better job promoting some of the pieces that I don't think the general public knows. Like, for instance, our 5-year graduation rates are in line with the 4-year graduation rates with the rest of the state. You know, these pieces I think are important when we're talking about the quality of the education that you're receiving, and then how many people we're actually preparing for going out into the school system. You know, and then there's always night classes and summer school too, just to bring that up. It's always good to try to get kids out in 4 years if we can, because 5 years is 20% more spending. But I also support the budget as is. So it's one of those things that when you look at communities that people invest in, especially young families, schools are very, very important to them. And it's the investment in our community that we need, both in preparing the workforce and being equitable in education, and for our future. So I'm going to vote to support it, but I would highly suggest that you look at the amount of money that you're sitting on in your fund balance and figure out if you can move some of that over, because this is a large increase quickly. So.
Councilor Roy, did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have an average on how many students per teacher ratio you have right now?
I could get that for you in a chart and send it back to you, but I'd have to go teacher by teacher to look at the current numbers.
And the reason for that question is I heard a teacher earlier say, you know, with a lot of challenges in the classroom with different languages and all that stuff, it's got to be kind of hard, and especially if they're like 25 kids in a class, that's got to be really challenging. I do know in this budget you're looking at, is it coaches, teacher coaches? Is there a way that they may be able to fill in for a class here or there to cut, I mean, not cut, but to save on some hours for teachers or anything like that?
I'm not sure what that model would look like. There's not enough coaches per se to do some of that, but they currently do cover when we have shortages. So there's already some class coverage that's happening.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilor Sol.
Can you just tell us a little bit about teachers, coaches? I did watch your last meeting, and I know there's a little bit of not everybody supports the coaches. Can you just explain what they do that's different than maybe like a teacher's aide?
Sure. So coaches are working more on the primary instruction. And so in the world of education, the very best thing you can do is have a great classroom and good routines and teaching and learning in that classroom setting. What happens in education is we often pull kids out of that space to get specialized something, and then they get put back in, but then they miss that time, that continuity, that peer time. And so to grow good instruction with teachers who are long-term subs, who might have a high school diploma, with teachers who are currently working on the certification and don't have enough experience yet. We even have a lot of very good teachers who are certified and trained, who appreciate the work to collaborate. And one example I've heard, and it's kind of a fun comparison, Tom Brady had a trainer. Michael Jordan had a trainer. Even our best educators can benefit from a thought partner who helps them grow their teaching practices. And so that's really the core of what happens. The other things that we see from the coaching model, teacher efficacy and the efforts around retention and people feeling like they have support for the work that they're doing and not just put out there. And so we're seeing a lot of good impacts. It's currently a voluntary model, and a lot of people do voluntarily access their coaches. But anytime we roll out a curriculum so that we have consistency, so we know where kids are falling down, we need support. Teachers are asking, I need to know how to do this. I need support. I need training. I need to know how to implement this, how to adjust to be the very best teacher I can, and that's what the coaches do.
How many coaches do you have for the whole school system?
So in the general fund, we have this 11 now because there was 12 and one was vacant, I believe. I'm looking over my shoulder. So that's what's in this budget for instructional coaches.
I don't really know how I feel about that, but I think education is obviously super important. It's probably the number one thing in any city. And I know we keep talking about the future and planning for the future. I think maybe sometimes we forget about the current and the present, and I can't ignore the voters. You know, they're worried, they're scared that they can't pay their taxes. I wish that we could make that different, but I just don't see that happening with this number. So I can't support this number. I don't know if you can take funds from the fund balance. I think that's definitely something that would be something to look at, but I do appreciate all the work that you guys have done on this, so.
Yes, thank you to all of you and to all of those who spoke. Yeah, so I'm a slight bit concerned that this will not pass. We have, yes, it was, 3.9% of voters, but it fell 2-1. So it's very different than what happened back in, 2015, when it fell by 6 votes. And the dynamics are different. The political environment is different. And I'm concerned that, $500,000 out of a $110 million budget is just not going to appeal to voters. Everyone came here to encourage us, but all of us to support the school budget. We passed the last one. We'll be passing this one. And I don't want there to be cuts. My kid's in high school, and so I really want to fully fund education. But I'm concerned that if we don't either make more cuts or move money from fund balance, if that's possible, we will be back here again. And every time we vote on the school budget, I feel like it harms us as a community. It says, unfortunately, a lot about us. Some of that is voter apathy. Some of that is just, yes, people may not completely understand, what's at stake and, what really goes into the budget and what are fixed costs and what is, things that are really beyond our control, like all the step increases from the contracts. And, the primaries in Administrator O'Malley, it's June 11th, is going to be the vote. And so that is coming up real quick in the window, and we're from where I sit, it's we're out of time for messaging. Messaging takes time, and I'm just concerned with the current proposal. It's just not going to pass. And comments and feelings, let's submit the current budget again, let's add more. I think that just speaks to the lack of awareness of where we are right now in terms of what the voters are feeling. All of us, around the table here, support the school budget. At this point, I would argue that the voters of Lewiston do not. And so there's some ground to make up there. Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak to a couple items that came up during public comment, and thank you to everyone who spoke. First of all, the increase in the local share in this budget is not 38%. It's closer to about 22. Last year, the local share was 26.8 million, and this year we're looking at 32 point something. So it's more like a 22% increase, still a large increase, but not 38. And then also for the ESER positions, or the positions that were funded by ESER funds, a lot of those positions, administrators found the value in those positions, and they sort of, in previous budgets, negotiated to keep those positions while allowing other positions to be cut. So at this point, those ESER funded or previously ESER funded positions, they're no longer extra. They are, if you were to cut them, you'd need to give the schools back the other positions that they cut in order to keep them. So they're really positions that administrators have found valuable and definitely need to be funded and are not expendable. Thank you.
Councilor Najin.
One thing I would suggest, which I kind of brought up about just your messaging in general, but like show your work basically. So the ESER positions, there were.
One second, Councilor Najin. If the audience can please be quiet. If you want to speak, please head out to the hall. Thank you. Please continue, Councilor Najin.
So the ESER positions, there are cases in which we removed or didn't fill in staff, right?
So at its peak, we had about 50 ESER positions, and it's been reduced to the sunsetting fund of 3.
And so for the sunsetting fund of 3, there were positions that we've decided not to fill that would have normally been in the regular budget, correct?
Many.
So if we spell out those things, I think it helps. You know, there's a lot of information out there that if it's presented and it's clear, it's easy for people to say, oh, that's the logical choice, or I understand now. I also absolutely need your help and your team's help on identifying and advocating against some of these unfunded mandates. There are, it's an election year. I want it to be a top issue for anybody who's running in Lewiston, for sure, and in the region. There's any of the larger school districts, I think, suffer from an unfair share of these mandates, and I think it's, if we want it to change at all during an election year, there's a possibility that maybe we'll get some traction on that. And then again, I would strongly urge that you use as much of the fund balance as you possibly feel comfortable doing in order to get this this budget passed and I'm not even sure if it will pass the referendum, but I at least reduce as much of the burden from the taxpayers you can at this moment.
Further comments from the council? Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to confirm that the store next door is not listed here as with any funds to be cut from that.
There are no reductions to the student resource.
Okay. We spoke about that earlier, but I wanted to confirm that there are no reductions in that program. Thank you.
Councilor Sol, yes.
Hi, I'm sorry, I don't really know how it works when the budget fails and then you come back. I know that you presented us with this figure. Is this the number that you're going to give us on Thursday, or are you going to rework it after hearing comments? How will this, is this the number that you're going to come back to us with on Thursday?
So I think it will, I'm taking it all in. And so for any changes to the budget, it would require school committee action. And so I don't know if there's time for a meeting between now and Thursday, but any change in the number would require their vote.
Okay.
That would be like.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councilor Sol. Yeah, if the school committee met between now and Thursday, that'd be tomorrow night, right?
Correct.
Yes, okay. Councilor Roy, did you have something?
Thank you. One of the things I wanted to ask, $1,000 out of the technology funding. I watched Skills USA this year. You were represented very well. You had a lot of youth that did amazing. I find that hard to cut $100,000 from that program. That's just one thing I wanted to say. And again, I just hope that you can find some money out of the fund balance.
Just to be clear, Superintendent, so if you wanted to move money out of fund balance, that would require a school committee meeting?
Correct.
Yes, okay, thank you. Further comments from the council? Further comments from Superintendent or Mr. Grant?
Just thank you for your time, and we'll keep trying to spread the information.
Administrator O'Malley, I don't want to put you on the spot. Did you have anything?
Nope, I'm all set.
Okay, and then I believe our clerk is here. Madam Clerk, do you mind coming to the podium and talking about voting and absentee ballots and voter access and all of that, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Kathy Monteo, City Clerk. Absentee ballots by state law, the state statutes define the parameter and time frame regarding absentee ballots and voting for the school budget. It does not run parallel to regular election deadlines, so we're actually running 2 elections simultaneously with different deadlines. So the election day is June 11th, as you said. All polling places will be open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. regular time. Absentee ballots for the state primary election, which are also on June 11th, are available now and have been available. Absentee ballots for the school budget under the state statute become available tomorrow. However, they cannot be submitted back until after the city council votes on the school budget, which is scheduled for Thursday evening. So folks are welcome. Folks have been requesting absentee ballots for the school budget all along. We've been holding those requests. We have about 250 requests that we are holding. We will send out 250 absentee ballots tomorrow. By the time we mail them back, by the time we mail them out and they're received, certainly they will have plenty of time to mail them back after the Thursday timeframe deadline. The final deadline to request an absentee ballot is Thursday, June 6th at 4 p.m. All absentee ballots need to be submitted back by 8 p.m. on election night, June 11th. We do have the drop box outside City Hall. There's lights on it. There's a security monitor. People can return their ballot 24/7 out in the drop box. They can hand deliver it into City Hall, and they can also mail it back. If you have any questions on the process, certainly happy to answer those.
We might have one right now. Councilor Galland.
Thank you, Mayor. What was the cost for the last school vote?
June 14th, the last vote. I haven't seen the budget because we're still waiting for the information from the Public Works Department, but we usually run that type of election around $1,500 or so because it's one location. I serve as the supervisor. The ballots are not on a voting machine, so we photocopy those ballots in-house, so it's done on a very low-key, low-cost. That's how we've always run the school budget. By having it in conjunction with the state election, it's now required to be on voting machines, so that is an expensive style ballot. We can't photocopy those in-house. We have to have the voting machines programmed and whatnot.
So I would have a question, should the superintendent decide he'd like to make adjustments, for $1,500, could we push it off a week and not line them up together so we can maybe get a budget that we could get passed through? Is my thoughts I'm offering to the council.
Superintendent Langlis, how much notice is required for a special meeting by the school committee?
I believe they could pull it off tomorrow if there's a quorum. I don't know the availability.
Given the comments that you've heard from us tonight, as well as hopefully taking into account of the realities on the ground, I strongly urge the school committee to meet tomorrow, so we can keep our same schedule. And yeah, I'm not an advocate for moving the school committee vote or the school budget referendum vote. Sorry. Further comments from the council? Comments from our superintendent, Mr. Grant. Administrator O'Malley, are you good?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk, thank you so much. And that's our workshop. You all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.